Dog Nation, Jackson, Janet's greetings and welcome to your daily dose of donkey with Ginger. It's your boy, the Viking Donkey, bringing you some off-season Steelers talk. So that means it's nonsensical, of course. Nonsensical Steelers talk. I'm here by myself this week. So what do we still have to cover? Uh, I think the obvious answer here is let's look at off-season awards, or not off-season awards, preseason, we'll call it preseason award predictions for the season upcoming, the 2024-25 season. And let's talk about a couple little tidbits of Steelers news. First and foremost, we're going to go ahead and let's talk about the situation involving Cam Sutton. The Steelers, after Detroit does the right thing, reading the affidavits and everything about the situation, cutting him, the Steelers rush to sign him, and they have to know good and well that he's going to face a big suspension. So signing him just seems to be a little bit, I don't know how to say it, inappropriate, not what you want to see going on here, and just rushed, right? It just seems to not make much sense here. And of course, Cam Sutton gets an 8-game suspension that he will not appeal. So now you're talking at best, maybe he'll be healthy and able to contribute in that long stretch run at the end. But is it really someone that we want here? And if we're in the stretch run at that point, is Cam Sutton going to help improve this team? Because odds are one of these other guys, whether it's like Beanie Bishop or any of the other young guys, has stepped up and really taken that role of slot corner. And do you affect the way the team's going by bringing a guy like this back in late? I mean, they've tried to talk about how great he is, how they know the guy, how he's a great guy, and all this, and how he can really teach the young guys. I mean, I'm sorry. I'm not sure that's the route you should have went on. What you should have said was he's a cheap guy who's known the system and been in the system and been successful in it. And I get it. Every team has these type of guys. These type of guys are floating all over the league. But I just, like I said, when it happened, I can't support getting behind a guy who I've said before I liked and I hated when we let him go because we replaced him with Pat Peterson for the same amount of money, which is a lesser player, and that proved to be true. But man, I just cannot get behind the signing of this. He's a guy who maybe helps you in the last half of the season, but if you're in it at that point, you probably don't need him. I get it's a low cost situation for the Steelers, but I'm going to say it again. I don't disagree with him getting a second chance. I just don't think the second chance should happen before he did the things that were necessary to move on from the incident. And there is no way all the stages that were set out for him have already been done. He's not a guy who probably has quite met that criteria yet. And just the rush the Steelers seem to have on this, man, it seemed desperate at the time. It seemed desperate now. And I absolutely hate that that's what happened and that this move happened before he proved himself to be rehabilitated from the situation that happened, let's say. Let's keep it that way. But now let's move on. Oh boy, oh boy. What should we talk about first? Let's go with the easiest award, right? And that's Defensive Player of the Year. And also MVP for me. Defensive Player of the Year, MVP are going to be one and the same, and that's going to be TJ Watt. You're going to look at another fantastic season from him. I'm thinking like 17-ish on the sack number this year, leading the Steelers defense, being the highest paid player on this team, showing he's worth every dollar that's been invested into him, and really standing out on a defense where I think you're going to see the overall numbers in terms of sacks and that, maybe take a step back, but still a top 10 unit Pat rushing the ball, and TJ Watt still being the difference maker on this team. So next, we'll go to the next position that I think is going to be the second easiest to pick, perhaps, or maybe it really won't be, but for me, offensive player of the year for the Pittsburgh Steelers. And this is a system that's really set up, and I think you should really look for Najee Harris to be the guy that steps in this role, right? He's going to be the feature back here. I think Jalen Warren's going to take a little bit off him, but you're talking a really run heavy scheme in a spot that's been successful with a back similar to Najee. I expect Najee to have his best year as a Steeler. I don't think the overall numbers are going to be impressive. I still think he's going to hover right around that 4 yards a carry thing, but I'm looking for an increase in touchdowns and just an increase of overall production from Najee compared to the system we had in place last year. I just think better numbers are going to be all around in the offense. Like I said, I think they get to a mid-pack in that 10 to 15 range in offense. And I think the biggest beneficiary here is going to be Najee. I think the quarterback play, which is probably where you could argue, is going to be a little more lackluster than what people want to admit. And personally, I am not feeling that there's going to be a big step out from George Pickens. I'm not saying he can't become that guy, but there's a learning curve when you now have to be that number one guy. And I think this first season with the new mix of quarterbacks, a new mix of coordinators, it's just not the right thing. So let's go the easy route. And the easy route is, of course, a running back in a running system. That's Najee Harris for me. And now let's go. Special team award is going to go to none other than Miles Killebrew. I think he's going to have another big block that leads to something. He's going to be the captain on the gunning team in that. And I think Boswell has a good season. I think Johnson's a really good pickup out there at the punter. But I think Miles Killebrew is the guy who's going to win this award and take it home for the Steelers. Just being that stud, one of the best at blocking punts, blocking kicks, an art that really doesn't exist too much anymore in the NFL is going to get huge. And now with kicks needing to be covered more often in kickoffs, he's a guy who can really shine, really show, really put out for the Pittsburgh Steelers. That leaves us with the award that I think is going to be let's go most improved player before we talk about the one I think is going to be the closest battle. Most improved player, I think it's going to be a guy who's going to really benefit from a system that is a lot more like a system he's played in before. And that's going to be a guy who's come over from Chicago, but not the one you're thinking. No, it's not Justin Fields. It's going to be James Daniels, right guard for the Pittsburgh Steelers, who wins most improved here. He's getting back to more of a mauling style type running system, more of what they did in Chicago when he was ultra effective before signing over to Pittsburgh, where he's been very average for 2 years. And being average, there's nothing wrong with that. That's a little undervalued for what his contract is. But I think this is the big breakout year for James Daniels as they are going back to a system that I think will fit him very well. And look for him to be a huge part in what's leading my earlier prediction for Offensive Player of the Year for the Steelers in Najee Harris. Now to the most, I don't want to say odd, but a hard one to pick as a Steelers fan, and that's Rookie of the Year here. And that's because not a whole lot of rookies make impacts on the Pittsburgh Steelers right away. I mean, you look, Broderick Jones waited a while. Joey Porter Jr. waited a while. It just seems like rookies don't really get in there right away. So really, the guys you're probably looking at are Troy Fontanu, first-round pick. Does he win the right tackle job over Dan Moore Jr.? I don't know. You know the Steelers love Dan Moore Jr. and love veteranosity. So not feeling huge there. Then we get to what? Second round pick. Does Zach win the starting center job? I don't think so. I think maybe Herbig wins that job too. So then we got to keep looking. I mean, you got the Wilsons here. Roman Wilson, wide receiver. That's a guy who, you know, the wide receivers aren't breaking out. And even if they do, he's a guy who probably still gets snaps or maybe gets some return ability in there. Maybe he's a good choice. How about Wilson on the defensive side? Man, they really pounded that inside linebacker, so he's probably looking at more of a special teams role right now. But who knows? He's an athletic dude who could get in there and get a lot of snaps early. Those are where I'm going to stop. Those are, to me, the possibilities. And the ones that I'm going to really focus in on is if Troy Fontanu can win the right tackle job, that puts him in a great spot to win Rookie of the Year. But that's not what I'm feeling. I'm feeling Roman Wilson really steps up as the Steelers' number two option. Now, here's the biggest problem. I still don't see him surpassing 700 receiving yards, but still, as their number two option, he goes out and he has a pretty solid campaign. Let's call it 630 yards, 4 touchdowns, a couple returns here and there where he doesn't break a touchdown, but he gets to return the ball, both punt and kick, and does a little bit of damage there, and becomes just really an all-around what should be a good slot option going forward, a good number three option going forward. There's still the hole at number two option, but I think Roman Wilson tries to play that this year, but doesn't quite fulfill it fully. And those are my predictions for the Steelers. Big awards: MVP, Defensive Player of the Year, T.J. Watt; Offensive Player of the Year going to Najee Harris; Most Improved Player going to James Daniel; Special Teamer of the Year in Killebrew; and Rookie of the Year in Roman Wilson. That's what I'm thinking. Let me know what you're thinking. Let me know where I'm crazy, who I'm missing. Did I forget about someone who's blatantly obvious for one of these? Now it's time to get to a shout out. And this shout out's more of you know, a kudos to a guy who once was a Steeler for a little bit and always will have a lasting memory in my head, but it's not as a Pittsburgh Steeler. And that's unfortunate. Unfortunately, going to be Jacoby Jones. He died earlier this week. Very young man. I mean, only 40 years old. But we'll give this shout out to him because I will never forget Mike Tomlin stepping on the field in front of a Baltimore Ravens return man who at the time, of course, was none other than Jacoby Jones. So this is like an RIP shout out to that man for giving a memory that will never leave my brain. Let's just call it that way. Now, it's that time. I gotta let you know, I'm the Viking Donkey. That's Viking_Donkey on Twitch and Twitter. Your daily dose of donkey with Ginger is a fun YouTube channel where you get all this fun content. Leave us a like, comment, follow. Let us know what you'd like to see, what you think works, what you think doesn't work. We'll see what we can do to get it in. We're getting closer here, everybody, to getting back to football talk that makes a little sense, But the nonsensical stuff is always fun. Thank y'all for tuning in and listening. Dog Nation, Steeler Nation, love y'all. Wave them if you got them. Here we go, Steelers.